Hello, everyone. I'm here to, so we'll start this all over again. I've been messing with this thing for a minute, but I wanted to come on and talk to, everybody about Project 2025 and how this election is so important. Because if somebody that we know that's been in the talking about, elections and whatever for 9 years, Lord, if y'all not tired, I know I am. But let's get started. Let's talk about Project 2025 and how it would impact Black communities. Brought to you by me, Mary Dean. Okay. Project 2025 is a sweeping plan encompassing various policy areas that could significantly reshape U.S. federal government and society, with specific implications for Black communities and marginalized groups overall. Below is a more in-depth look at specific policy areas, followed by strategies for resisting and challenging its potential impacts. Key policy areas of Project 2025. Number one, government restructuring and the administrative state. Their proposal. Project 2025 advocates for reducing the size and scope of the federal government. It seeks to eliminate certain federal agencies, reduce regulations, and transfer many responsibilities to state and local governments. This includes scaling back agencies like the Department of Education, Environmental Protection Agencies, EPA, and programs designed to protect workers and civil rights. The impact on Black communities. Many federal programs, particularly those that protect civil rights, voting rights, environmental justice, and public education, have been critical for Black Americans. Dismantling federal oversight risks increasing state-level disparities, especially in states with a history of racial discrimination and underfunding of public services in Black communities. And it's happening now, especially in the South, but in the Midwest, really all over. But it's specifically in the South. But Midwest, hey, we don't want to leave you out. Number two, dismantling diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI programs. Their proposal, the project seeks to dismantle DEI programs within federal agencies and potentially extend this to private sectors like education, corporate America, and public employment. Impact on Black communities. DEI programs have been instrumental in addressing long-standing racial disparities in employment, education, and business opportunities. By eliminating these programs, there would likely be a reduction in representation and opportunities for Black professionals. And this could result in a return to the normalization of majority white spaces in many institutions. Pay attention to that. And this could result in a return to the normalization of majority white spaces in many institutions. They trying to roll it all the way back to Jim Crow, 2.2, 2.5. Number three, immigration reform. Their proposal. Project 2025 pushes for stricter immigration enforcement, including tighter border controls, deportations, and eliminating or curtailing pathways to legal status for undocumented individuals. The focus is on protecting the national identity and economy from immigration. Impact on Black immigrations. Black immigrants from Africa and Caribbean nations would make up a growing percentage of the immigrant population, could face increased hardships, including greater risk of deportation, limited access to citizenship, and increased vulnerability to workplace abuses due to immigration status. Pay attention, y'all, pay attention. And this is something that they're doing already. But the implications of what could really be worse is that if the Donald and his cult gets in office. Number 4, criminal justice. Their proposal. The project emphasizes a law and order approach, potentially including increased funding for policing and tougher sentences laws. There may be rollbacks to efforts to reform the criminal justice system, including decarceration efforts and programs focused on rehabilitation over punishment. Impact on Black communities in arrest and incarceration. It would be tougher sentencing policies, would also disproportionately affect Black men and women, further exacerbating the mass incarceration crisis. Over policing and disproportionate sentencing have long been issues in Black communities. Increased funding for policing without attention to systematic reform, could worsen racial disparities. And we all know who, we might be, 13, 14% of the population, but how many of our people are actually in prison? And Clay Kane of Urban View, he does an exonerating series every Wednesday. And he has people who have been incarcerated for 30, 27, 14 years of their life, and then come to find out that they were innocent of that crime. You hear me? Number 5, economic policy and deregulation. Their proposal, economic policies under Project 2025 are likely to focus on corporate tax cuts. Lord, like they ain't getting enough. They already getting tax cuts, which is, I think they expire. Trump's tax cuts for the rich and expires this year sometime. But they're up for grabs next year. That's why it's important to vote. That's why it's important to get Madam VP Harris and Tim Walz into the White House, y'all. They won't do this. Deregulation of industries and a more market-driven economy. The federal government's role in overseeing corporate practices, especially in areas like housing and healthcare, could be significantly reduced. Impact on Black communities. Economic deregulation and tax cuts primarily benefits wealthy individuals and corporations, potentially exacerbating the racial wealth gap. Without federal oversight, predatory practices in housing and finance could increase, disproportionately affecting Black homeowners and renters who have historically face discrimination in these sectors. Deregulation in healthcare could also lead to less oversight in addressing health disparities faced by Black communities. Now, we already know that the rents have gone up 400% of what people used to pay, mortgages, and the people who are renting, depending on the area that they live in, the region, East Coast, West Coast, Southeast, whatever, their rents have gone up significantly. 500%. I hate to exaggerate, but that is the truth. And what's happening? Those that can't afford to pay those exorbitant rents are kicked to the curb in the streets, in their vans, in their cars, just sometimes, a lot of times in the streets with their children. Here's a country richer than supposedly any other country in the world, and we have homeless people that can't afford to pay their rents and mortgages because of corporate greed by these people that have bought up all of these apartments and whatever across the country and raising the rents purposely to get people kicked out on the streets. And now they're making laws in certain cities and states that say homelessness is illegal. It's against the law. They can be arrested, but they're not trying to make it where people can get off the streets to live where they can't pay these exorbitant high rents. It's just sad. Number 6, education policy. Their proposal. The plan calls for the dismantling of the Department of Education, pushing educational oversight to states and local levels, and reducing federal involvement in school curriculums, particularly concerning topics related to race, gender, and history. Impact on Black students. The rollbacks of federal oversight in education could worsen inequalities in public school funding, particularly in states with a history of segregation and underinvestment in schools serving predominantly Black communities. The elimination of affirmative action, the good old Supreme Court, the good old Clarence Thomas and Gorsuch and all the rest of them crazy people up in there, look what they did. The elimination of affirmative action in education would further reduce access to higher education for Black students, particularly at elite universities and institutions. They've done it already. They're doing it at these elite universities already. And it could be worse under the dumpster administration. 7, healthcare policy. Their proposal. Project 2025 aims to reduce federal healthcare programs, potentially cutting funding for Medicaid, and weakening protections under the Affordable Care Act, ACA. There's also an emphasis on moving toward privatized healthcare. And we already know about privatization. Who is it for? Who it ain't for the weary, it ain't for us. It's for filling them pockets up, y'all. They don't care about us. Impact on Black health. Black Americans who disproportionately rely on Medicaid and have benefited from ACA protections would likely face reduced access to affordable health care. Given that Black communities already experience high rates of chronic health conditions and face systemic barriers to quality health care. These policies could deepen health disparities. They already view us as non-human. We don't hurt, we don't have pain. Just give us an aspirin and go away. You'll be all right. Because that's how they view us. All right. There's some strategies that, could be used for resistance. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so I can read it. Okay. Resistance to Project 2025 and its potential impact on Black communities can be approached in various ways, both through organized collective action and policy advocacy. Here are several key strategies that Black activists, organizations, and allies could consider. Put it down. I don't know why it went so small. Grassroots mobilization and community organizing. Importance of organizing. Historically, grassroots movements have been essential in challenging government policies that harm marginalized communities, from the civil rights movement to Black Lives Matter. Collective action has been a powerful tool in confronting systems of oppression. Local organizations can help raise awareness of how Project 2025 policies would directly impact Black communities. Let me reduce this a little bit and go here. I don't know why I went all the way down to 4 and all that, but anyway. Action steps. Community organizations can mobilize voters, particularly in states most vulnerable to harmful policies. Organizing protests, educational forums, and campaigns to hold elected officials accountable are essential. Local chapters of national organizations could play a key role in mobilization. Number 2, legal challenges and advocacy. Legal resistance. Many of the changes proposed in Project 2025 would require legal or legislative action. Civil rights organizations like the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund could challenge efforts that dismantle DEI programs, weaken voting rights, or roll back health and education protections. And I'm hoping that these organizations that I've mentioned, that they're doing that. I've heard that a couple of lawsuits have they've been filed, I think, in Georgia and other places, but I'm hoping that there's more, because what they're doing in Georgia and some of the other, like Nebraska and all that, where they trying to figure out how in the heck they can give this election to that, as BP Harris wanted to say. But we got to stay woke, y'all. Action steps. Support and engage with legal efforts that seek to preserve civil rights, affirmative action, and healthcare protection. Advocacy groups could file lawsuits that challenge policies violating constitutional rights or federal laws like the Civil Rights Act. Number 3, voting and political engagement. Importance of voting. And that's what a lot of organizations are doing now. Saturday, the Deltas Incorporated sorority, they were doing voter registrations, and a lot of organizations across the city and I'm sure across the country are trying to do the same thing and getting people to register to vote and be politically engaged. Importance of voting. Project 2025 is a roadmap for a future Republican administration, which means political engagement at the local, state, and national levels is critical to resisting its implementation. Voting is a direct way to influence who holds political office and what policies are implemented. And people need to understand that you just don't vote national. For the presidential election, we need to be engaged in voting locals, county, state, school board, judges, all of that. Because really the state and county and school board elections is so important because that's really where a lot of your policies are made. Your policies and laws. Come on, y'all. People need to be more engaged in your local, state, county, school board elections. They are so important. So important. Action steps. Black communities must continue to fight voter suppression efforts and promote voter registration, particularly in states with histories of disenfranchisement. Mobilizing the Black vote, especially in key swing states, will be crucial to countering policies that harm marginalized communities. And, they've been saying forever and a day that we got to come out overwhelmingly November 2024 and to make sure that these people that are in a state of denial that the orange clown lost an election in 2020. He lost by what was it? How many votes was it? Well, they said 81 million people fired him. But we need to go over and above making sure that when we vote this time, that there won't be any clapback on the fact that this person lost the election. We need to come out over and above to vote for VP Harris and Vice President and Governor Tim Walz. We just got to do it, y'all. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. We got to do it. So nobody can say on the other side that it was cheating going on. They probably gonna say it anyway because they're already saying everything's rigged against them. And I mean, anything this man says that, folks, they go along with it. Why? I just don't get it, but there you have it. Number 4, education and public awareness campaigns. Raising awareness. Public education campaigns can highlight the potential dangers of Project 2025 by educating communities on how specific policies will impact Black individuals. Activists can build broader coalitions for resistance. We had to do that back in the day, back in the civil rights era, the 60s. That's what we did. We were successful. because we all came together for a common cause. We weren't in all these different silos that we have now. And we got to come together, y'all. We do. To beat this monster in November 2024. Action steps. Social media campaigns, town hall meetings, and partnerships with media outlets and influencers can help bring attention to the specific threats of Project 2025. Educating youth and Black-led organizations on the potential impacts will be essential for mobilizing resistance. Number 5, solidarity and coalition building. Building alliances. Resistance to Project 2025 will require broad coalitions across racial, ethnic, and social economic lines. White allies, Latino, Asian, indigenous communities, labor unions, and other marginalized groups should unite with Black organizations to form a strong, diverse resistance movement. Action steps. Building coalitions with organizations advocating for immigrants, LGBTQ plus rights, women's rights, and workers' rights can amplify collective resistance. Coalition building allows for shared resources, broader public support, and increased pressure on policymakers. It's a lot, y'all. I know, I understand, but it's a lot at stake. It's a whole lot at stake. Recommended reading on resistance and advocacy. These are some books that have been recognized, recommended to read when it comes to resistance. Now, those of us that have been part of a resistance for most of our lives, we already know. I mean, you know, we've learned by just doing the groundwork, organizing and doing the groundwork, implementing an action plan and doing the action plan. But you know, some people need to read how they can resist this nonsense. And so they recommended several of these books. It's one of them is A More Beautiful and Terrible History. The uses and the misuses of civil rights history by Janine D. Harris. It examines the civil rights movement lessons for today's activism. Then there's When They Call You a Terrorist. You know, anytime that you go against the status quo, what they gonna call you? A troublemaker or instigator and a terrorist. Who's a terrorist? Who is actually committing terrorist attacks against innocent people? Who's doing it? Not those who are really concerned about their communities. They're not terrorists, but that's what they're gonna call you. But you know, they're saying Black Lives Matter memoir by Patrice Clankan Colors and Aisha Vandale, a firsthand account of resisting state violence and organizing for Black lives in the modern era. Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Y. Davis. It discusses the connections between Black liberation movements in the U.S. and global struggles for freedom and equality. All right, y'all. The bottom line to all of this is Go out and register to vote and then exercise your right to vote. It's so important. Our ancestors, they lost their lives. They laid down their lives and everything for us to have the right to vote. And I know a lot of people will say, my vote don't count. Well, if your vote didn't count, why do you think they're making all of these laws and to suppress your vote and cause a delay in counting and what if your vote didn't count? Okay, think. If your vote didn't count, why do you think they're doing all this? They cannot win without cheating. And it's a shame that we live in a democracy that's all they know how to do is cheat. And then, yes, it does discourage people. It would discourage you because you see that the people that's in these positions of power, these stakeholders, they ain't doing what they were voted in to do. But because you did not exercise your right to vote, the voters in the primaries are always low. And then them so-called stakeholders and policymakers and legislators and city council and all of that, they the ones get in because low voter turnout. And then you want to say, well, my vote don't count. Well, your vote counted if you had got up and did what you needed to do and get out there and vote. We could turn some stuff, y'all. We could do some things. But it's up to you and us as an individual to want change, and you should want it for yourselves, for the younger generation, to make a change when it comes to what's going to impact their lives on a daily basis. So there you have it. I'm at the end. Do the right thing, make the right choice, and vote. Good night, y'all. Love y'all. Take care.